Hola a todo el mundo y bienvenidos una tarde más a nuestra emisión en directo del Café con el Experto. Hoy es un Café con el Experto un poquito especial, ya que vamos a cambiar de idioma. Sé que el canal Sinversando es un canal para compartir experiencias de simulación en español, pero la idea de hoy es poder aprovechar la gran experiencia de Marc y cambiaremos al inglés. No os preocupéis porque YouTube genera subtítulos automáticos y si queréis revisarlo después estarán activados, así que os invito a hacerlo. Y sin más, me paso a hablar con nuestro invitado. Hello, Marc. Welcome to this Coffee with the Experts. We are really glad. We're really glad of having you here today. So, first of all, I always ask to all of our experts who you are and where are you today?
Well, where am I today? Honestly, I'm at home right now because I wanted to go to my institute, but the weather is not so good, so I decided to go home instead, because otherwise I might be trapped there and not be able to go through the rain on my motorbike. I don't like that. So I'm at home, right? I'm having my cup of tea here to be
nice.
Yeah, to be in sync with your theme. And where is my home? Well, currently my home is in Munich, in southern Germany. I'm working here at the university hospital, leading the sim center of the hospital, basically. We have people coming.
Yes. So yes, we are always arriving late, you know. So that's our schedule. So I expect people coming and more people joining the session. So I have another question for you, because we try to be really informal in this kind of session. So I would like to ask you what you are drinking. Is it coffee or something different?
No, I usually don't drink really coffee unless it's an espresso after a meal. In the afternoon, I'm drinking a tea, and
Special
it's a good
tea today, or
it's no. How do you call that? Thé à la menthe. It's
cinnamon tea.
No. It's whatever. It's a normal plant. No tea meant to get you awake or something.
Nice.
I really don't know how you call this in English.
That's strange, isn't it? So I'm drinking tea as well today. I always drink tea. And
nice cup.
That is a common passion that we share, and I think simulation as well is something that we love, and that's why I invite you here. So I think this coffee is really interesting, because we are going to speak about virtual reality, augmented reality. And, you know, I'm an outsider of that topic. And for me, like, virtual or augmented reality is something really cool. But I don't really know.
It
is. It seems really cool, but I don't really know the specifics about the virtual augmented reality. And I'm quite loose. So I think maybe other people not involved so much in virtual reality is as loose as I am. And you could help us to understand a little bit what is what. I mean, for you, when we are speaking about virtual reality, what's that? What's that for you as an expert?
Well, for me, let me put it this way. For me, it's a cool field of work and of research, just generally speaking, because we are doing a lot of research in this area, But let me maybe share with you one slide to explain it a little bit. And the idea is that I try to show what I mean by virtual reality and these things. And then let me just share my screen, find the right screen.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, in the last years, this topic have started growing a lot, and I think the terminology around it could be confusing sometimes because it's growing so fast, and there are things that are mixed, and I think that's why it's important to understand what is what.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The terminology is, everyone is saying augmented reality, virtual reality, whatever. And this is why I try to show here that we are moving along a continuum. It is not this is this and this is the other one. We are moving along an axis. And I mean, here, this is reality, right? This is a thing, I have it in my hand, it's here. You could argue that we both being in a Zoom, that is going into the direction of a bit of augmented reality. I see you, although you're not here, right? So when we start from getting away from real reality, the first step is augmented reality. This is maybe what these are Google glasses. So in augmented reality, everything you see around, or most of what you see around, is real. So I see this tea, but also I could have the name of the tea above it, or I see a lot of people and I have their names because I'm very bad at names. So that's the first step where we add something non-real to the reality. And if we go further into non-real things, that's a HoloLens basically, then you get in your real environment things that you can manipulate and move around, so touch without feeling the touch, but you can manipulate them, and they are not real. So this is maybe in the middle. And then obviously you get to the full immersive virtual reality, where you have these goggles. You see nothing from the outside, you see just the virtual world, or as in this picture, you might see your hands. These could be the real hands, so to get an orientation. But in complete virtual reality, you see nothing from you or from the environment. You're just from the real environment, you're just completely immersed into virtual reality. And so this is, the truth is, one term that might explain them all is mixed reality, because you mix what is really here and what is just in the computer, and the degree of mixing is different. So if you have nothing from the computer, you're in reality, and if you have everything in the computer, you're in virtual reality. So this is how I see it.
That's, for me now, I think I understand where is augmented and where is virtual. The difficult thing for me was differentiate one and the other one, but as I can see, it's kind of something that moves into the other, no, in between reality and being in a full virtual environment.
Exactly. And you know what adds to the confusion is all the guys from the industry, they call virtual, when you're talking about simulation, they call virtual reality trainers like laparoscopy or bronchoscopy trainers. They are not virtual reality. They are augmented reality or mixed reality at best, because in these trainers, you certainly know, you have the bronchoscope in your hand. It's physical. You put it into a device, which is representing the patient, and then on the screen, you see a computer-generated image. But in real bronchoscopy, you have the bronchoscope in your hand, you have a patient, you put the bronchoscope in, and you see exactly on a screen, more or less an image from inside the patient. It's not computer generated, it's film, but you could call that computer generated. So the difference is just that I have no patient and the image is created by a computer, but this is not virtual reality. Virtual reality would be, I put the goggles and I'm completely in a virtual environment. So everything you hear about virtual reality simulators, in fact, are mixed reality simulators.
So I have another maybe difficult question. But the thing is, you know, during the pandemic, a lot of people stopped doing simulation, like face-to-face simulation that we do traditionally. And after that, a lot of people start doing experiments through Zoom or other video conference or things like that. So a lot of people start calling that virtual simulation. And after that, some people call that online simulation, and a lot of people is calling that distance simulation. So I think if we have kind of mixture of terminology before COVID, after COVID, I think saying virtual, I don't know what it means. So I would like to know your opinion. I mean, for you as an expert of virtuality, pre-COVID expert, what is what we are doing now? I mean, if I'm doing a scenario through Zoom or whatever, in what kind of simulation? Is that virtual? Is something okay to say, or are we mixing like words, or what's your opinion on that?
I think it's difficult to give a single answer. And the interesting thing is that there has been a very recent paper by a group of people addressing exactly this problem. I don't have it in maybe I have it somewhere here, but yes. I can send you the paper afterwards. The thing is, what we did due to COVID is not always identical. Some people had a setting where every student was at home, they had no mannequin, and they had just vital signs and imagined the mannequin. Other did something where maybe they had 2 students at home and 2 in a center with a mannequin, and the facilitator was at home as well. And then you may remember during the SESAM conference, we did Sim University, where we had all the students in one room with a mannequin, but the facilitators were on Zoom, and the vital signs were transmitted via Zoom. So I think the best word for all of this is kind of telesimulation, because some elements are distant from each other, but honestly, nothing is virtual in these settings. It's, I mean, in normal simulation, when you're in a center, there is no patient. The vital signs are computer generated. So that's a bit of augmented reality, maybe. but the element you added through COVID is distance. So that's why I prefer to call it tele than virtual simulation.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I know the healthcare simulation dictionary has done an extension of terminology for how to express what you do now. And I'm seeing most of people is saying like telesimulation. Maybe that's a term that we are not using so much here in Spain, but I've been speaking with a lot of Latin American colleagues that are using telesimulation for defining it all. And I think it's kind of tele distance, maybe it's the most accurate one, but I mean, there are like, I check in the dictionaries about 15 different ways to call that. So I think that adds a little bit of difficulty on terms of, and as well of how you, when you would like to share your outcomes. And I know thinking about research, what I'm seeing is a lot of people is putting different names and it's kind of messy. I don't know. That's why I am asking.
Yeah, it does add to the confusion. Absolutely. Interesting enough, before COVID, this was a thing as well, telesimulation. I remember attending a session, well, several years ago. I think it was in Bilbao or even before, about telesimulation in Norway. You know, they have those drilling stations out in the sea, the platforms, and they have no doctors there. They have just very, very limited medical knowledge. If they're good, I think they have a nurse. And if not, they have a basically trained someone. And they do telesimulation from the center in Norway, the helicopters flying. By having a mannequin there and the facilitator on the mainland. So they did telesimulation before COVID.
Nice. I haven't seen that experience before. It is nice. I think now all of us are doing things like that. I mean, and it opens a really, really big field of opportunities of working with people in other countries.
Yeah, it does.
That's really exciting. I mean, we have been working with, I don't know, 6 different countries all together in doing something 2 weeks ago, and it was like, oh my God, what we are doing here, facilitator in one country, the briefer in the other, the student in the other. It was like kind of amazing experience. And that's nice. It's the virtual world is giving us a lot of opportunities to meet more people and all of that. So let's go to the virtual, and when we mean virtual is like augmented and virtual. The last thing about terminology, and this is a question that I have in mind because I'm kind of working with a friend in France that are doing serious games. So when we are referring to serious games, where do you put a serious game? Virtual, augmented, or it could be look through the spectrum. What's your opinion on that?
That depends a bit. So if it's a serious game on the monitor, where I don't immerse myself, I would say it's not augmented reality, because it's just in the computer. It's when I'm playing computer games. Do I call that virtual reality? No, I don't. It's a game. Some people tend to say it's a virtual reality inside the computer, and to make a difference between immersive virtual reality, where I put the goggles and I'm there, and non-immersive, where I just look into the world and see what's happening. So probably a serious game in this terminology would be a non-immersive virtual reality.
Okay.
But I know there are some where you play on the screen, and there are some where you immerse yourself, which is also very cool.
Okay, so I think we have like the concept itself kind of defined. So of course, I'm going to next question, always tricky. And the next question is, we all think that virtual reality, augmented reality is really, it's not cheap at all, I mean. And first of asking how much it costs to implement those kind of programs, there is something that I'm sure a lot of people is asking. The first thing that I would like to ask is, virtual reality, augmented reality works? I mean, do we have evidence saying that those ways of approaching training makes an effect? Or we are just trying to generate evidence?
Well, to be very honest, I think at the time being, we are struggling to have evidence about training in general, right? We have some economic aspects where we see that maybe infections go down when we train that. But does it work? That's a very good question. We don't really know, generally speaking, how good, I don't know, training on a patient versus training on a simulator, how that compares. We know that many, especially in surgery, many national associations make it mandatory to train on the simulator, which is an augmented reality simulator. So we presume it works, and we can show, or it has been shown, there are several studies on surgery. It has been shown that people get better through training at that what they are training. So they get better in the simulator. And there is a certain assumption that when you have seen a lot of simpler things in the simulator, you can perform in real life as well. This problem is common, I would say, to every simulator setting, because no one is doing a double-blind study. You go to the simulator, you go to the real patient. Pilots, they train regularly in the simulator, but no one has tried not to train half of the pilots and see what happens. So, and simulators are, it is not double blind. If I give you a real bronchoscope or a simulator and I tell you, ha, you don't know which it is, of course you know. So we cannot blind the learner to the method. And not even in aviation, you know whether it's a simulator or not. So I would say, yes, we assume it does work. But as with everything, the simulator is a tool. Just if I give you a simulator and tell you learn, you will not learn. If I give you a simulator and a curriculum and learning goals and a whole learning cycle, then you will learn, of course. So it's just a tool. We need to use it correctly, embed it in a curriculum and do good things with it.
Yeah, so I would like to ask you, you are speaking about surgery, and yeah, we know there are a lot of virtual or mixed reality simulation for training the surgical area. but how the virtual or augmented reality simulation is used today? Do you have any kind of, who is using that? I mean, the surgeons, we know it, but I think it is in a trend of extending into another fields, like decision making, or can you share your...
It is used a lot in all manual things. I mean, bronchoscopy is not for surgeons, or not necessarily. So it's used everywhere where you can easily recreate in the computer whatever you do for manual training. The immersive virtual reality, like maybe, I don't know, Oxford or whatever, there are many products, because there you have a problem. When I'm training bronchoscopy, I have the thing in my hand, right? So all the haptics are there because they're physical. When I'm doing a resuscitation training in virtual reality, I have nothing there. I have no patient. It doesn't feel real. I see it, but I don't feel it. And that's a problem. So there have been many ideas to transfer the learning in virtual reality from the manuality, where if I can't touch it, I can't train manuality, to the process, to train the steps, to train, as you said, decision making, to train, the whole process. What do I do when? How do I maybe coordinate a team? If I have a team of virtual persons, I can, talk to them, even if they could be real or they could be computer generated. But I can talk to them. I can coordinate the team. So in all areas where I don't have a physical device in my hands, training tends to go towards process, dosages, energies for defibrillators, steps in the process, team coordination, stuff like that.
Yeah, I understand. And I mean, this is something important as well to be trained. You have mentioned a word that is commonly related with virtual simulation, and it is haptic. And I know people starting in the world of simulation struggle to know what is haptic. So I will be really happy if you could explain what is haptic and what elements it involves.
Okay, well, it's pretty simple, because when we are in a real environment, everything around us is an object, a touchable object. I can touch my tea. If I lift, I feel it's warm. If I lift it, I feel it's heavy. So everything around me I touch. In a medical environment, I touch the instruments, I touch the patient, I touch, whatever. In a fully immersive virtual environment, there is nothing to touch. I see objects, but I put my hand out and there is nothing. There is air. And that is a problem for our brains, because our brains are not used to objects that are made out of air. So that gives a bit of cognitive problems. And there have been different approaches to this. There are special gloves where you can, there are like forces. So if I move my finger, I feel a force here because I'm pulled back, basically. When I'm using instruments, I can have something in my hand like this, but I put it into a force feedback device. So when I move it, I feel a force. We have been, some years ago, we have been working on a study to design a simulator to train, again, surgeons, I know, to do vertebroplasty. So where you hammer something into the spine. And the problem is bones are hard. And we did not succeed to give the surgeon an appropriate feeling of hardness. You know, when you go, let's say this is a needle, and I stick it here, and then I go through the skin, and then it's muscle, and everything feels different. You know that if you ever put a needle in a person, right? And then you reach the bone, and the bone is, it's a hard stop. And that hard stop is not, it's basically impossible to reach that with haptic feedback, force feedback devices. So what we did in the end is we 3D printed a spine, so you had to really hammer something. But that's the thing. And this is just my fingers. If I want to train in a virtual environment, and there are several projects around this, to train how to tend to a patient. Now, a patient is heavy, right? Maybe they have 70, maybe they have 100 kilograms. To give someone the impression of lifting, turning even 50 kilogram patient, that's a lot of force. So then they have like a whole harness that you put on yourself, and that gives force to the arms, like I'm lifting something heavy, but it's very cumbersome. So there we have a problem in the virtual reality, and that is haptics. Haptics is what you feel by touching with your hands, by touching with, imagine you are in a cath lab, right? And you are wearing a lead vest. Yes. A lead vest is heavy.
Heavy.
And you feel that heaviness. That's haptics. And if you have no lead on you, you don't feel it.
Yes, I understand. And now thanks for clarifying all of that, because I always thinking about haptics on hands, where I understand now that haptic means anything related with the sense of touch.
Yes.
I mean, everywhere in your whole body. Thanks for the example about the cath lab, because it makes me think like in a bigger picture. And I think that's really interesting. And really interesting thing. So the other thing is, okay, when you have mentioned OS4, decision-making virtual simulation, and I specifically remember the first time I put a glasses, and I was there with a patient, and in a way, I have tried that before with other virtual realities in the past, but they were not so well defined wherever. So I remember the first time that I put those glasses, I started working with a patient. I feel it so real, and I made a mistake, and I give an antibiotic, and the patient was allergic. And that was my first experience with virtual or really immersive. So I remember myself feeling tachycardic and guilty. I mean, I remember feeling, oh my God, I've given an antibiotic and the patient is allergic, and I put out the glasses, and it's wow. So the next question that I have just in 1 second is, what about safe container in virtual reality or augmented reality? Because I think from the commercial perspective, sometimes it's kind of a game, but you know, you involve there emotionally. And are you working, or is something defined about how to have the participants there and immerse into the virtual world and then come back to the real one? Because for me, it was so traumatic. I mean,
well, so first of all, to my knowledge, there is no specific work on a safe container in virtual reality. But I think, and here we come back to the, what we were discussing before about a tool. Yes, industry might see it as a game. So, you gave the wrong medication. But we are educators, and we need to always remember that we are putting people into stressful situations. I mean, honestly, there is no difference whether you give the antibiotic in virtual reality, you give it to a mannequin, or you give it to a patient. Well, if you give it to a patient, that's bad for the patient. But from your perspective, it's similar. You recognize that something went wrong, and of course you'd feel bad about it, right? So that's the natural reaction. In mannequin-based simulation, let's say, if things were to go very bad for some reason, we always have that safety net where you send someone in and he says, hey, you could say timeout, or you could say, I'm the consultant and please explain me what's going on. So you have a safety net. In virtual reality, you don't. The computer is playing the game, right? So that is an interesting aspect. Honestly, I haven't thought about it in this way yet, but thanks for sharing the story, because it's indeed, you are alone there, right? And something happens and no one is there to stop it. So maybe we should always be careful when leaving learners alone in virtual reality, because things like these might happen. On the other hand, it is as it is, right? If you were to be on a night shift alone and this happens, it's not so good. So life is not always a safe container. And maybe, I mean, real life. Maybe getting to experience this on a very soft level in virtual reality might prepare you. Well, I hope you never make that mistake in real life, but you know what I mean. Maybe we should tell people, look, it will feel very real. If something goes wrong, you might feel bad about it. And I'm always here. Let's say I'm the facilitator. I'm always here to talk about it afterwards, like a debrief.
Yes. And I think, I remember specifically that experience because I put the glasses for playing a game. That was my perception. And I completely became into a reality where I feel real. And then I was like playing with the menus and asking the patient and giving like medication like randomly, not following the case. And even I was trying, it was that feeling. And I started thinking about how to start working with students with that. And, now we have, in my institution, we have bought software, blah, blah, blah. And we decided this year to start using it. But then we discover we don't have enough facilitators for doing like the introduction to the software and explain the things well before exposing students to maybe traumatic situations. So we have decided to start next year and prepare better, because we understand that going into a reality, it doesn't matter it's face-to-face or virtual, could have consequences, and you have to explain it. So
yeah, absolutely,
that's something that we decide, and I think it's important. I mean, it's not a game. You are training, you have a professional role, and you are as exposed as in the face-to-face simulation. to be exposed into difficult situations that maybe are challenging for you.
Exactly. And I think this is true for all these fully immersive simulations, the procedural ones. You know, when I'm training sutures on a laparoscopy simulator, I can focus on my sutures, and okay, I mess up, I try again. It's a very narrow band training, but when I'm exposed to a whole situation, then I need to tell people it is sort of a game, but it's not a game. It will feel real for you. Take it seriously. Don't do stuff you wouldn't do in real life, because then, just as in your story, you know, I can go in and say, ha, let me give this, and then the patient gets bad, and then I feel bad. So explain this to the learners. I think we need to treat this just as every simulation, because in mannequin-based simulation, we don't tell people, go in and do whatever you think. We tell them, act.
Pre-briefing, yes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And it is no, you know, a lot of evidence now is saying a good pre-briefing is so important for
Absolutely.
the scenario, the debriefing, the results of the learning results. So, and maybe that is something that we are forgetting in the virtual world. We have to say something about that. I mean, I challenge you, Marc. So, more things related with being in another world. I know there is something called virtual reality sickness. Is that the term? And people is like feeling strange. I think maybe it's related with equilibrium, or I don't know. Can you explain us a little bit about going into a world or wherever?
That's pretty simple. It's and we're coming back to haptics. Your feet are also haptic, and obviously your inner ear. So what we do in virtual reality is we give people very strong optical sensations, and we as people are used to be very optical. You should try to stand up and stand on one foot. That's easy, isn't it? And then close your eyes. And that's not that easy anymore. Suddenly, ooh, you could try that. And what we're doing in virtual reality is we are giving, I mean, you have worked on ambulances, right? Now, I don't know the ambulances in Barcelona, but I know the ambulances in Munich. And when you're sitting in the back with the patient, you don't have a window. Not really. It's obviously you don't want people to look inside. And sometimes you sit with the back to the direction. That's, some people tolerate that very good, and some not at all. I was talking to a colleague 3 days ago, and he's from somewhere else in Germany, and he said they have one route with many serpentines, and some doctors explicitly refused to go to the hospital behind that route because they knew they would get nauseous and sick. And you know, a sick doctor with a sick patient, that's not so helpful. So they went to a different hospital because they could not stand that that route. And this is the problem. We disconnect our visual input from our sensory input in the inner ear. You know, in virtual reality, you can fly and you can whatnot, but your body is not flying. You can feel you're like this, but you're like this. And if you are sensible to this, you could get really nauseous, like sick. This is one thing. And the other thing is these monitors are flickering. You know, the light is not constant. It's not like daylight. They have shutters, they have different mechanisms, and that might trigger as well different effects in your body. It might even trigger you know, like epilepsy, but even if not, that gets to you. If you go to the cinema and have 3D, I hate 3D cinema because all the time when I'm there, I get a bit strange and nauseous, or I get a headache out of it, or whatnot. So this is a real effect, and some people cannot enter virtual reality for a longer period because they get sick, or they get terrible headaches, or they get whatnot. So we should be careful with this for our learners, for our students as well. It's not like, here, take the goggles and be happy. Maybe he's not happy, and in 5 minutes they will be sick on the toilet, and then.
Yeah, I think something really important that is why I ask for that, because when you are starting with virtual reality, maybe you don't know about it until you have a student like that, and that's something that we have to keep in mind for giving opportunities to the people that is not feeling okay with virtual reality, of having a training as well. So if you are thinking about starting with virtual reality, have that in mind and have plan B for the possible candidates that you are having in your training.
Absolutely.
So you are saying a lot of things, and my brain is kind of generating a lot of ideas, and I hear you saying we are really optical. So I'm going to relate our conversation now with fidelity. As we have speak in other coffees or maybe in some classes, we are defining now fidelity in simulation. And I'm going to refer to a model. It's the Jenny Rudolph ones. It's kind of defining the physical fidelity, the emotional, and the conceptual. So here in the virtual reality, what impacts more in terms of the feeling of realism on a person? Is that the physical, or I think optical in that case, or what is involved there? I mean, if we want to have a good experience and our students engage and having like a feeling of realism, what are the elements that you know right now are impacting more in the perception of realism, considering the 3 kinds of fidelity, or even there are more in the virtual one? I don't know, just a curiosity.
I think we're all curious about this, honestly. If we define,
I know you are working on that. That is why I'm asking. I know you are working on having like people there. Maybe you can show some photos, then we could understand I am asking.
Let me, I will not show you a photo. Let me show you something different. So I think if we are defining physical reality really strict, then in immersive virtual reality, we're not talking about augmented, but in immersive virtual reality, there is no physical environment, right? So we have no physical fidelity. We see things, but we cannot touch them. So the fidelity is rather, it can be emotional, as you described, and it can be conceptual. So what I'm doing is realistic, has fidelity to what,
yes.
Yeah, but just to give you a different example of how this can backfire, I also tried, I don't know, it might have been Oxford, but maybe some different simulation. No, it was not Oxford. It was a different one, a US-based immersive virtual reality thing. And it was a code situation. You had to deal with a patient with a resuscitation. And suddenly there are like 5 people there. The respiration therapist and the intravenous specialist and the blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is not my reality, right? In my reality, there are 2 or 3 people and everyone can more or less do similar things. I have not one that is just going to place intravenous access. And suddenly, because the conceptual fidelity was not there, it was not my world, I felt completely disconnected. If, on the other hand, the defibrillator is looking different from the one I might have been using, I don't care, because I know there are many defibrillators. But if we're talking about a pre-hospital situation, if the uniform they are wearing are blue and not red, probably I would notice briefly, but then not care. You know, things like these. But if the whole concept is not there, then I have a problem. And I'm going to show you another brief slide about also what are we doing in virtual reality. Now, that thingy here, that smiling person, that's me, right? The real me. But now I enter virtual reality. And how do I see myself in virtual reality? I could see myself as, I don't know, as some science fiction person, and I could see all my colleagues as such. Or I could be invisible. I could just see my hands, but no body. Or I could be sort of a shape of myself, or I could be, you know, a fully dressed shape of myself. This is not me, this is a colleague, but he's looking pretty similar to this because it's a 3D scan of him. And it's not clear. This is a degree of fidelity that is new to virtual reality, right? Because in any other simulation, I'm always myself. My body is here. I can put some clothes on or not, but it's always the same person. And my colleagues are all persons. They look like people. They are people. Even in full protective equipment, they are still people. And if I know them, I probably can recognize them. In virtual reality, I could be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I could be you. I could be this person here with a strawberry as a head. And we don't know. The fact is, we don't know how this might influence our perception of team. How do I feel when my team is just hands? I see maybe a face, a floating face and hands, but no body. How do I feel about that? I don't know. How do I feel if my team consists of science fiction characters, of, you know, T-Rexes and stuff like that? We don't know. So apart from all the other fidelities, I think in virtual reality, we have this added aspect of, you know, body fidelity. I don't know how to call it.
Yeah, three-dimensional perception, or yourself and your colleagues, I mean, or your team. I don't know about anything about that, but I guess if I see you like T-Rex, for me will be kind of strange.
Yeah.
Then if I don't know you, you are working with T-Rex, right? I mean, if I'm working with you, is Marc a T-Rex today? I don't know.
Yeah, and how does it affect authority gradients? Maybe we are colleagues, but maybe I'm your boss. And now I come as T-Rex or as the strawberry man. Does it affect it? We don't know. This is really an interesting field to research. Can I stay serious when my colleagues are looking like something,
That's really interesting. I mean, we have entered into the fidelity and the realism that it's something so discussed in the face-to-face simulation. And I think here we are adding kind of complexity into that. So that is really, really interesting. So now we know what is what, it works or not, and the evidence, and a little bit of details about virtual reality. So I think the next question I have for you, I know you are involved in a lot of projects of virtual reality, and I think it could be kind of inspiring for the people listening us. If you could explain some of the things you are now doing or the challenge that you are facing, and I mean, people could have in mind kind of an image of how we are addressing virtual reality in high performance environments. I'm referring to your work with surgery and augmented and virtual, or other work that you would like to share with us. And I remember that you sent me through WhatsApp some images, and I thought, wow, it's really nice. I would like to know more. So remembering that time, I would like to show the people who see in us kind of an experience about how you are working now with virtual reality. We don't hear you, Marc. You are mute.
Yes, I have to do that once at least. No, thanks a lot. I think this is very interesting. Before I come to this, I would like, though, to, because I haven't answered one of your questions initially about the money. It's like with everything in simulation. You can work with pretty low-cost things. Not that low cost as with physical simulators, because if you go for a HoloLens costs 2,000 or 3,000 euro one. But if you have one, you can do a lot of things with it. You don't need a lot of stuff apart. But, if you have a pair of goggles, you can do a lot of things. You buy them once, you run programs. There even are options to take your phone and to make out of cardboard sort of a structure that you put on your face, and then you slide the phone in and you have sort of goggles. So you, with very simple elements, you can go there. But yeah, it's highly technological. So if you want to do research or anything, you will have to invest. So that's and what I'm going to show you maybe some images.
But Marc, as you are saying something really important. I mean, the first time that I see virtual simulation, it was like, oh my God, that is going to cost that thousands and thousands of euros. But you are saying now, sunglasses or maybe augmented reality, you have a pair of glasses, and I mean, I suppose as well, a computer which is able to process all that heavy programs, and that is not such an investment. And maybe a lot of people is thinking about a lot of money, and that is not so much. And on the other hand, as well, you are explaining about the mobile phone and the use of the mobile phone. And nowadays, everyone has one or more than one. I mean,
I just to give you an example, I had it was a group from Latin America. I think from Chile they were several years ago. That's why I don't remember very well. And they had a training program on the mobile phone where you had two paper clips in your hand, like this, but made out of paper, with a special design on them, and they were recognized by the camera in your phone, and by manipulating them in the app on the phone, it was a three-dimensional virtual reality something. It was for surgeons, I believe, again. But you needed nothing more than this. So it was pretty easy to use and low costs in terms of investment, but obviously they had put a lot of work. The advantage in virtual reality is really that you don't need a new hardware for every situation. You have the computer and the goggles, and then you put a new program, and usually it runs.
Nice perspective. I think maybe people seeing us today or in the future will start thinking that virtual simulation is not so far from their budget. So I think that's an interesting thing to know as well.
Yeah.
So
and I was talking about or coming to some interesting projects, and I want to show you a photo and then one or two brief videos. So the photo is this one. What you see here is the lady here, and this should be an ambulance. It's obviously it's not an ambulance, but these are the walls of the ambulance. You just imagine the patient is in an ambulance, and what she's doing is she is placing a 12-lead ECG on this mannequin with the help of someone who is not there. You see, she's wearing HoloLens. So her colleague is not there, but is virtually there, and they can interact and place the 12-lead ECGs on the mannequin. This is a project we are working on right now, and it involves people being virtually in a place to help other people. And to better demonstrate this, let me show you a brief video where you can see how this is working. And honestly, this is very cool. So I'm just showing you to see what cool stuff you can do with virtual and augmented reality. So you see this scene here is combined. This guy on the right is physically there. The simulator is there. Everything you see in the background is physically there. The guy on the left is not there. So if you do not wear a HoloLens, you don't see him. He's just virtually there. And now you could, I'm running the movie, and you will see how they interact. And I'll stop the movie from time to time to explain what you are just seeing.
Ja, guten Morgen, Dirk.
Okay, they're talking German, sorry.
Geht soweit gut und dem Patienten geht es eigentlich auch gut.
So what you see here in the main screen is the view of this guy, of the yellow guy. This is what his eyes are seeing, what the HoloLens is seeing.
Erwartend sozusagen.
And what you see here is the other guy, you know, the remote guy, he's in a different room. He is wearing immersive goggles. He has controllers in his hands, and he sees a recreation, a completely virtual recreation of the environment where his colleague is in. So he can look around and he sees more or less everything. You obviously not perfect quality, but you can see what's going on, and you see the vitals of the patient and his medical history in high resolution.
Sagen, ist über die Nacht nicht viel passiert. Allerdings, wie du siehst, hat sich der Sauerstoff reduziert. Das ging eigentlich kontinuierlich so über die Nacht. Wir sind jetzt gerade bei 81, das heißt, da müssten wir vielleicht irgendwas tun.
Ja, ich sehe schon, das ist natürlich kein...
So you see what they're talking about is the saturation of this patient has dropped throughout the night. This is an intubated, ventilated patient. He's now at 82, which is not so nice. And they are discussing how this could be remediated. And when the remote person is annotating, like he's doing here, he's drawing a circle around a value, the other guy sees it in his HoloLens. So when he looks at the patient monitor, he can see that green circle, although it's not there. If it takes off the HoloLens, it's just a patient monitor.
Eine gute Entwicklung. Kannst du mal schauen, ob der Fingersensor gut sitzt, ob das Problem dort ist oder ob er wirklich ein Problem
Now they're checking whether it's a real problem or it's just the clip.
Das kann ich natürlich machen.
And you see the circle, right? Yeah, no.
Ja, das war scheinbar nicht, da gibt es keine Veränderung. Also der Sensor war soweit in Ordnung.
Yeah, and now I'm not running the whole move because you've seen the basic elements. It's the virtual, the remote colleague and the colleague present on scene, and the shared annotations and all the way they can interact, although they're not in the same space. So this is virtual reality as well. This is not so much educational, this is cooperation more, like when you're not in the same place, but you are able to get a colleague to help you or something like that. But this is, this is research.
This is, you have created that tool for helping people in the clinical areas, is that right? Or
clinical and preclinical. So we do that, as I've shown you with the ECG, we could do that in an ambulance car as well. But this is, it's not finished, it's not way from commercial, this is research.
Okay.
And this does imply some serious computers in the background and some programmers who know their stuff. But I think all developments start like this. The first virtual reality or augmented reality simulators were the computer graphics. When you look at them, they look primitive to our eyes. You think this is a computer game from the 1980s. And that has developed. So everything is developing. Computing power is more and more. So I think this is really, these are the beginnings, you know. What we're so this is one area of work. A different area of work we're doing is what I was telling you about the vertebroplasty. That was meant for training, definitely. For training novices that do not know the procedure, and before you go and stick and hammer something in the back of patients, you should maybe train for that. And I think the interesting story there is that you need, I mean, it's nice to have programmers and to be able to do stuff like that. But you need a very, very close cooperation with matter experts. So if you don't have on your team an experienced surgeon, then you don't need to work to develop such a simulator. And sometimes, honestly, looking at simulators commercially available, I'm not sure they had an expert in their team when they developed it. Sometimes you look and say,
Yeah, I understand. So thank you for explaining us or giving us that example. In my mind, quite futuristic. I mean, and I know it's research, so that is why I think it's a way to think in the future and open our minds to think in future possibilities. And I work in critical care, you know, and that has opened a really world of thinking in my mind. So thanks for inspiring us. So I think about helping a little bit the people to know how to start into the virtual reality world. And we have a question in YouTube that is related with my next question. It's kind of reading my mind. So it's from a dear friend in Paraguay. It's called Nelson. And he's asking a question about what do you think is best for integrated virtual reality in pre-graduate students? Because he's asking about it is better to do it in a progressive way, or maybe it's better to do intensively. I think Nelson is trying to do something like that there in Paraguay. And on the other hand, he's saying that in his context, and I mean, when you are starting with something, your teachers are not familiarized with that tool. So what's your suggestion for answering those questions? I think it's more than one.
So first of all, I think we have to see that probably our students, we're talking about, you know, undergraduates, probably our students are more familiar with some of these technologies than the teachers. So it's important to present them, or to make clear, and this comes back to what we discussed before, to make clear it's not a game. It's not something you just play with. Maybe they are computer gamers. Maybe they are using virtual reality on the phones. So I think it's important to make this clear, and then just use their ability to interact with virtual environments. Tell them, okay, you know, in the HoloLens you have gestures, like funny gestures. You do like this and something happens, and they always think that's crazy, but others, for them, it's just normal. So use their ability to interact with this. And sorry, the other question was whether it's better to use it intensively or just. Okay.
Sorry, I was mute, but you understand me.
Yeah, I think that really is. You first have to think, what do I want to teach? What is, at this step in my curriculum, what do I want to teach? And then, is there any appropriate tool, be it virtual, be it physical, whatever, for me to teach this? And if there is a virtual tool, then I would try to offer my students the option of learning at home. You know, oftentimes we have them coming to the center and there are opening hours and they use material and whatnot. But if we're talking about procedural training, about algorithms, about stuff like that, interacting with colleagues, they could train at home. They could download the program on their phones, on whatnot, and I would offer this actively, so they can train at home. We 2 years ago, yeah, I think 2 years ago, you know, ATLS, the trauma program. It's like Advanced Trauma Life Support, ATLS. And we are working very close together with the German institution that has licensed ATLS and provides ATLS courses. And when you're an ATLS provider, your license is only valid for 4 years, I think. And then you need a refresher. And the refreshers were physical courses before. You had to go somewhere and do a refresher. So what we did was a virtual refresher with movies of patients, with computer-generated vital signs, where you just at night, whenever you want, sit in front of your computer and go through the cases one by one. And in the end, it's an exam, also virtual, and then you have your refresher. And this showed me how eager people are to learn whenever they can, in their free time. I mean, students, you could say, have always free time, but undergraduate students. But if they don't need to come to the center, if they can come once and train, so I would do like this: offer them a lot and let them train.
Make the tool available. I mean, that's the message. And really interesting what you are saying. And we have another question. Yes. Laura here in Zoom is asking about what are the recommendations you will give to an educational institution to get started with virtual simulation? How we settle the program? What the things to get in mind? I mean, just buying the things, or do you need anything else? Thanks, Laura, for the question.
Again, you need first, before you go out and buy stuff, you need to clarify why you want it and what is appropriate for your goal. So if you want to do, let's say, bronchoscopy training, you need a bronchoscopy trainer. If you want to do procedural training, then you need a pair or several pairs of goggles. And just because we're living in COVID times, I would like to remind everyone that these are cleanable. So you have also on the HoloLens, you have spare things that go on the head, and they cost nothing. Not nothing, but very, very little. And you can disinfect them. So if you're a bit careful, you can, obviously you do not put them as a whole in a disinfectant, but you can disinfect them. So you buy a pair of goggles and some computers and the software. Basically what's expensive here is the software. So I would always go, what do I want? Why do I want that? Because in my curriculum it says blah, blah, blah. And then look what is on the market and buy the most appropriate thing. If you say you're starting, like you have nothing like this, you might want to find someone computer savvy, more than computer savvy, to help you with administration, installation, even if you don't need programming. This is high-end computing stuff. It's more than the average audio video system or something. This is high-end computers. So you need a good administrator who is there and available and open-minded and doesn't say, oh, this is Windows 10, I don't touch Windows 10. Well, the product is Windows 10, so please use it, right? Or whatever, yeah, insert your operating system. So in terms of personnel, these might be the thoughts you want to have. And look at your bandwidth. Is my network good enough for this? Stuff like that. But that the computer guy will tell you.
Yeah, and I think it's like simulation itself. I mean, it requires technology. It requires a lot of things. In this case, more. But what I'm saying here is not the tool, is how you are going to use the tool. I mean, and that's something that you have said before, the curriculum and what's your aim with the tool. I mean, that's, for me, that's the most important thing in a simulation, is understanding what kind of value is going to give you the tool. I mean, as a general advice for everyone, I mean.
Exactly, it's really that. But that's true for everything, not only for virtual reality. Do I need a sim man? Maybe, but maybe I don't. It's curriculum, learning goals, and then it's stuff. And many people start with the stuff and then, oh, this is nice, what can I do with it? And that's not the correct order.
Thanks. So we're starting to have more questions here. We have one question in the YouTube channel. I'm like trying to put all together. So in YouTube, we have Jean de Cormil from France, Toulouse. He would like to know what kind of debriefing are you using in virtual reality? I mean, are you using debriefing at all, or is anything better than other?
Well, if you do, this is pretty easy. If you do an individual learning where you're trained for a skill, we don't use debriefing, because then, you know, the machine is just telling you the score. And what I also learned is people, when you have a score, they try to get better. It's like their ambition. When we train procedures and we have a team, then we do a normal debriefing. But just as with any other simulation, I don't use a special debriefing adapted to virtual simulation. I have in the reaction phase, they tell you whether they felt this was real or not, or they are nauseous or whatnot. But then regarding the actions, I use just the same debriefing I would use with a mannequin, more or less.
Thanks. I think, I mean, we have seen a lot of experience about how to debrief like virtual experiences, and I've seen the same that you are saying. The people is using the debriefing is more used to in the face-to-face, in the virtual one. So
well,
as a debriefer,
are we talking
I
about
say
virtual or telesimulation?
Virtual. I've seen people doing debriefing about virtual, not tele, and they are using like the one they are familiar with. So
exactly. So
I will suggest not to experiment too much. If you are experimenting with virtual, don't experiment with debriefing. It's a lot of new things altogether.
I agree.
Just go for the debriefing that you feel okay, and it gives you good results. As a general,
fully agree on this. If you go into virtual reality, the technology will take away a part of your attention, and if you start 3 new things at once, that's not a good idea. So better stick to the debriefing, and just change that technology.
So we have another question. I'm super happy that people are starting to do questions. So people is Paola Radek from Chile. She's asking about, do you know any kind of resource for asking to grants or kind of funding for doing virtual reality projects? Do you know any specific call or wherever?
For Chile, no. In the I've been funded by some German authorities, by the Ministry for Research and Education. They have calls very specific on integrating virtual reality in learning and in life. The European Union, the European Commission also have some pretty specific calls in healthcare and in education on this. So I would suppose that all funding agencies, but I really don't know any other apart from the Germans and the Europeans, but I would suppose that every funding agency, especially in the realm of education, not so much in healthcare. In healthcare, they don't see this as necessary, but it's the education where they say, okay, virtual reality for learning, virtual reality for integrating virtual reality in life. What you could look for in healthcare is, but this is again my European perspective, is helping or supporting weaker groups like elderly patients that are not going to the doctor, but also are not so much digitally native, helping those groups of people with virtual reality to, I don't know, to get better healthcare. We had just one project about doing physiotherapy. You go to the first session and then you meet your physiotherapist online, and you with an augmented reality, they can see how good your movements are and stuff like that. So, but outside of Europe, I don't know of any programs.
I think in the European Union calls, some of them allow to have countries outside Europe, not as a partner, but just as a third party. That means that have some rights and not some ones. And there are projects that I know Chile has been involved. So okay. Maybe Paola, I don't know. I only know Europe. And but I know some of the calls allow to integrate countries that are not in Europe. So maybe something you could have in mind. And if you have colleagues in Europe and they work in a topic that you love, maybe you can ask them to include you in the call, because that's something usually allowed in most of the European Commission calls. I mean, in IT health, I don't know, but in the European Commission, as third parties are usually welcome with some kind of restrictions, but
yeah, the restrictions are usually in terms of how much funding you can get, or from which region of the world you can be. But it's always, it's a good idea to look at this, but probably you or Spain would be a good link between the European Commission and Latin America.
Yes, and I know, for example, in our university, a lot of groups, they establish European networks, but as well networks in Latin America through European Commission grants. So that's something that you could think about, Paola, because is a good way to have a strong grant and having the opportunity to have funds for your research. So I think we have gone a lot through the virtual reality and all the elements involved in it. And I think we could start ending the conversation. So I have the last question for you is, after being all these years involved in the virtual reality and augmented reality, what do you think is the most valuable thing that the virtual reality or augmented reality offer to us as educators and to our students? I think you have mentioned things, but maybe put all of them together. Why virtual reality? Why we should go this way?
Well, you could ask, should we go this way? But
what's the value?
I think I think it's several things. It is giving the student a certain flexibility, learn when you want to learn. It's giving us as educators also the opportunity to change the environment more easy than we would in physical. We can, we can adapt it to our local hospital colors and whatnot, or we can tweak the difficulty for the learners. But this is in balance with maybe some disadvantages, like, is it for everyone? Do you get VR sickness or not? Maybe if you get it, it's not for you. It is a cost question. Do I go with my phone in a cardboard thing, or do I buy goggles? How do I make sure they stay in my lab and do not disappear? Because VR goggles are very cool.
Yes.
Yeah,
I know we are that.
We as well, we are constantly chasing our HoloLenses. Where are they? Who had took them home? Bring it back, blah, blah. It's because these, we need to understand, these are general devices. A SimMan, no one will take the SimMan home because you can't use it. But my HoloLens, you can always use it. Or my VR1 or whatever, right? And they are small, and so you need, it's a give and take. I think it gives us a lot of flexibility to train unusual situations, or to train and retrain whenever we want. But it's not like everything in education, basically. It's not one size fits all. It's not, I wouldn't go and tell everyone in the audience, go do virtual reality. Think of it. Does it fit or doesn't it fit? And then decide.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks for all this conversation, all your insight, and all your tacit knowledge about virtual reality, augmented reality. I want to thank everyone for being here with us today in this YouTube. I'm going to say goodbye to our YouTube viewers in Spanish. So, gracias a todos por estar aquí con nosotros, con Marc, discutir y plantear vuestras preguntas, que son siempre súper interesantes. Podéis ver esta charla de nuevo. Creo que me han comentado que los subtítulos en el directo no funcionaban, pero una vez que se suba el vídeo a YouTube, yo creo que vamos a poder ver la charla con subtítulos para quien se haya perdido algún trozo de ella. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros un día más y os animo a que sigáis conectados a nuestro canal. Este mes tendremos más cafés con el experto. El siguiente es sobre simulación quirúrgica, que también es un tema muy desconocido para los que nos dedicamos a la simulación médica, y os animo a que nos sigáis. Sin más, me despido de todos vosotros y os deseo un grandioso día y que disfrutéis al máximo de vuestras experiencias en simulación en el día de hoy.